You're listening to the Sketchnote Army Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. You're listening to the Sketchnote Army Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Rohde, the author of the Sketchnote Handbook and the Sketchnote Workbook, and this is the podcast where I chat with sketchnoters and visual thinkers and try to understand what makes them tick. Hey, are you looking for the ideal sketchbook for your sketchnoting practice? The Sketchnote Idea Book is the sketchbook designed for sketchnoters. Equipped with no bleed, no show-through paper, you can take almost any marker or pen you can throw at it. Get 10% off with code ARMY at airship.store. Hey everybody, it's Mike and I'm here with Andy, aka Rev Gray. Andy, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you.
It's good to have you. We were connected by Patty and Grant, good friends of mine, who actually just finally met in Holland just this fall. So really good to make that connection and have people out there. I've always got people out there suggesting people how to have on the show. So thank you, Grant and Patty. Probably more Grant than Patty, I suppose. But Rev, why don't you tell us like who you are and what you do, and then go right into your origin story. Like how did you get here, doing what you're doing, and all the interesting tidbits along the way.
Yeah, we're gonna go back a long time. So who I am, what do I do? I'm a graphic recorder, and I'm a children's and grown-up book illustrator, and I illustrate magazines as well. Think of me about, I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy called Quentin Blake?
Quentin Blake, I don't know that name. It sounds familiar.
No,
but I don't know
if I say Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, yeah.
And I say Roald Dahl, and I say the person who illustrated Roald Dahl, then immediately you start to get to know who Quentin Blake is. So he's just turned 90 actually.
Wow.
And so if you take his style and you mix it with people from the other side of the pond, because obviously I'm a Brit, people from the other side of the pond, from your side, say, oh, you look just like the New Yorker. So think of me as an editorial cartoonist illustrator, and you won't be far off. I'm also a Church of England minister. I've been in youth and children's ministry for decades, and I plant churches and stuff, and I train people and coach people, and basically I try and help everybody to live life in their fullest. I'm also a DJ, magician, a dad, husband, and general mad person. I do everything I can. I get bored easy.
Well, you fit right in the Sketchnote Army podcast and in the Sketchnote community, because we're all quirky. I've been reminded of that when I just came back from Leiden, from the International Sketchnote Camp there. And loved everybody. You know, we're really community-minded, but we're all quirky in our own ways. So you fit right in.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've kind of got this target. Next time you do something like that, I want to be there. So it's I was too late to take advantage this time, but I want to be there next time.
Sounds good. Well, why don't you get into, like, where did you start from? Like, you can go back as far as when you were a little baby, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, we were talking just before we started rolling, weren't we? Okay, so this will make some people either laugh or they'll be sick. If you're eating at the moment, do stop. Have you finished your mouthful? Excellent, good, right? Because my mother tells me very reliably that the first time that I got into art was when I was in my cot when I was about 2 years old. In fact, probably younger actually, probably much younger, just a toddler, so maybe about 18 months. And when she put me down for a nap in the afternoon, I would take the contents of my nappy and I would smear them all over the walls. So, it's an early start in my expressionist period, using brown pigment and various shades. So funnily enough, she stopped putting me down after that. I guess it then, I've only just in the last 5 years been diagnosed as having autism. Or being autistic. I'm actually autistic, or as we prefer, Asperger's, or neurospicy, which makes sense for a lot of the things which I'm going to tell you about. But I couldn't sleep as a little kid, which is quite normal for autistic people, you know. And so I'd wake up about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'd have pens and paper. And I remember so often I just wouldn't be able to sleep for about 4 hours. So I'd get my pens and paper and I would just draw continually for about 4 hours. And then mum would come in and she'd see me, that I'd be falling asleep with pens and paper all over my bed. And so like the next thing would happen the next night. So I obsessively drew. And that's kind of like always been my story. I couldn't draw that well. I used to always be jealous of my friends. At school, they could draw really well, and I couldn't. Felt a bit rubbish till I was about 14, and then I started. It started with me copying Beano. Have you ever come across Beano? Which is if I say comic, the problem is that sort of like around the world, comics are kind of like superheroes and stuff. In the UK, we talk about comics, and we're talking about sort of like cartoon characters in strip cartoons. You might call them. Okay.
Yeah, we had those in the newspaper. I don't know.
Yeah,
Beano,
that's
though.
right.
That's not a character right now.
Right. Okay. So it's that kind of style. So Dandy Beano, UK people know exactly what I'm talking about. So think for you, it's the kind of simplistic style that you get with Peanuts.
Yes.
You know? And we have magazines full of that, which is just fun. And I used to copy Bash Street Kids, which people will know the name of over here. And I could get it so that I could draw them without needing to reference them. And so I just did that, and covered all my school books in Bash Street Kids and other illustrations. And you weren't supposed to. I went to a dead posh private school, and you weren't supposed to do that, and I did. It wasn't naughty, but I just didn't get told off for it because they like the rest of my work as well. So I drew all of this stuff. And then when I was 14, like I said, I couldn't really draw. And then my little sister was born, and my dad took me away. And when he took me away, I bought a book on pencil drawing techniques. So we were just on a holiday for 2 or 3 days, and I just started drawing from that book. And suddenly, literally overnight, it clicked, and I was able to draw anything I wanted in pencil, realistically or not realistic or whatever I wanted. So the first gig came in maybe about 6 months after that from somebody, because and she wanted a picture of Peter Rabbit. So I drew it and she paid me 10 quid. I thought, ooh, this is easy.
Yeah.
So back in the 80s, 10 quid's nothing to be shy of. So I did bits and pieces here and there, but I really wanted to be an editorial cartoonist. So when I got married in my early 20s, I self-studied the style of how to be an editorial cartoonist. And it went really well, but ended up working so hard. I was also working in for a company called British Gas, and it was a regional office. And it was the size of a warehouse, and it was just open plan office space. So if you can imagine what that was like and what that did, and I was right in the middle of it, what that did to an autistic brain, not knowing I was autistic at the time. And I was trying to get this editorial cartoon business going. And we didn't have internet in those days. Do you remember that? We didn't have internet, did we, in the very early 90s? I had a fax machine. I was dead proud. And that was it. That's all we had. And so trying to get the business in was really hard. And although I sort of like newspaper did pick me up for a couple of issues, that was it. And I ended up burning out really badly. And during that period, I sort of like I didn't have to have time off work with stress. Somebody came to me and said, look, find out what God really wants you to do. So I'm a Christian. Like I said, I'm a minister. They said, find out what God really wants you to do. And within 2 weeks, I'd worked out that really I needed to put the pens down and just say, God, what do you want me to do? And within 2 weeks, somebody come back and said, why don't you train for youth and children's ministry? So it's like, all right then. That sounds right. And it came from so many places, people saying it. They didn't know each other. So I thought, we're going to do it. So dived into going training, and I sat in the lecture theatre listening to theology and sort of like getting fairly bored because theology is quite a boring thing, really. Yeah. And while everyone was taking notes, I'd done the taking notes. I learned how to mind map. I also learned memory techniques and all sorts of other things, just trained myself in the whole lot. But then when nothing interesting was happening, I just started drawing. And so I didn't draw anything particular. I just drew in the same way as I used to draw in my school books. So that was great. And then I found myself drawing a little bit for the college because they wanted little bits and pieces done. So that was okay. Then I went to go and be a youth and children's minister. And I found that the art stuff that I did then became what I was doing as part of my ministry. And so that lasted for, I think, we'll do rough figures, about 10 years. And then I went to go and work for a Christian publishing organisation. So they got about 10 million, 12 million pound turnover. And they did publishing as well as training people. So I trained people around the country and in the northwest of the UK in working with the young people and children and how to do it and how to help them get a life of fullness and all the rest of it. And they found out that I could draw. And so they said, would you mind drawing a book for us? Oh, that's quite good. Oh, a book for you, right? And they paid nicely for it. Oh, that's all right, isn't it? And they said, would you do some more drawing for us? And so I had this side hustle of drawing at the same time. And it all went through their books, so I didn't have to do any bookkeeping or anything. And that was very nice. And at the same time, so as we drew to the end of that, I was doing more and more drawing for them. I was also learning how to be an entrepreneur and developing those skills of running businesses, but also lots of side hustles. So I got things going, and I was trading in MP3 players and all sorts of other things on the side. It's great. And then I got a calling to go and get a dog collar. So so the whole dog collary thing for to be a church minister, besides just a youth and children's worker. So for me, it wasn't really an upgrade. It was just a development of ministry. I was doing something else. But I was going to become a pioneer, an ordained pioneer minister, which means planting churches in interesting places like coffee shops and things like that, rather than going running normal churches. And I knew that I didn't really want to be full-time paid ministry, because it ties you to the church, and I'm a minister for people who don't go to church. That's the kind of person I am. Anyway, I trained this theology, and while I was doing it, I went back to drawing at the back of the lecture theatres because it's boring. So, and I could write the papers, no problem, do the study and stuff. And then one day, because it was pretty small things that we were doing. Small cohort. There's only about 40 of us, and we were just really good friends. So I was about 40 odd at the time, and I was really good friends with the lecturers, because we all just got on together. It is that kind of format when you're doing this kind of training. And one of the lecturers one day turned around and said, "Look," he said, "would you draw what I say?" I said, "Sorry, what?" He said, "Would you draw what I say?" Well, I don't know. He said, "Well, yeah, instead of just drawing," he said, "I'd love to see what it looked like if you drew what I said." Oh, all right then. So I drew what he said, and it's like, oh, that's quite interesting. So I then just started drawing what people said. So instead of drawing sort of like, I mean, I don't know whether people are familiar with what you might call Christian art, drawn and painted in sermons and the like, but it's usually quite squirrely-whirly, and it's usually got hands in it, and it's usually got a dove in it. Sometimes it might be the story, and that's about it, and it's art. But I wanted something else, so I started drawing art and then combining key phrases in there and making it part of the art and doing that. And I just built on that. And then when I was ordained, and I was a trainee vicar, if you like, so the best way of putting it, so a curate, sometimes I wasn't lecturing. I wasn't actually leading, and I wasn't preaching. So I'd sit there, bored again. I can't stand church. I'm a minister who hates church. I get bored. That's why people love my sermons and my talks and the way I lead church, because I get bored quicker than anybody else does. So that's great. So I sat there drawing instead. And because I got in this habit of drawing what people said, I started drawing the sermon. And I would start by seeing, so we'd have a bit of a Bible story or a Bible passage, and then I'd draw the outline of that, and then I'd start putting in smaller elements of what was preached on within that bigger picture, and where necessary, adding words. Great. Did that for about 10 years, And then I found that throughout all of this, with the theology side of things and stuff, people started saying, "Andy, can we have a copy, please? It'll help us remember." There's no skin off my nose, So they'd take copies, and then they'd share them around and all the rest of it. Anyway, when I left, so I did another job coming out of that, because after 10 years, so church planting and all the rest of it, that was great. And then I decided that it was time to start moving away from being a paid minister and I wanted to achieve being self-supporting minister, so that I wasn't tied to the whole. There's quite a lot of management involved in the Church of England now, because you have to look after more than one church. And so there's a huge number of meetings, everything else. And I thought, that's not me. I have to sort of like be freelance, if you like. So a little bit of prayer. What do you want me to do, God? And sort of the answer came back, look, try and work towards being self-employed and stuff. And then what should I do? You know, be an illustrator. I'm not sure I want to be an illustrator again. And then within 2 weeks of this conversation, somebody came to me and said, Andy, you don't remember me from college days 20 years ago. We were in the year below you. We've just found you on Facebook. Do you still draw pictures? Well, oddly enough, yes. I've just started getting back into drawing pictures and be paid for it. Oh, great. Could you illustrate our book for us, please? I don't want to illustrate books. Spoke to a mate of mine. He turned around and he said, look, he said, you got to illustrate. He said, you got to do whatever God sends you. Oh, all right then. Okay, fair enough. So I did this one book, and it's not stopped ever since. So I didn't get it.
One
so
thing
slowly
leads to another, eh?
Yeah, slowly the price has gone up, and every time I finished one book, another book. I mean, I've got I think it's 8 projects sitting on my desk at the moment of books people want illustrating. It's a nightmare. Anyway, can't complain. So what happened was, though, that as I got out of this, so this was 5 years back. I dropped down to working for the southwest of England, training people in churches and to talk about their faith, funnily enough. But carried on training people, and I've got a way of coaching and a way of styling how I train people. It's all the same thing. It's selling them the idea that they can actually do it. It's great. And so I can do that. And during this time, I was illustrating more and more books. And then September last year, I realised that I'd started. The grant funding was running out this coming summer, so the summer just gone, and I realised I'd have to leave even earlier than I thought before the money ran out. So I said to the guy who was my line manager at the time, I said, I've just turned down in 1 week I've turned down £3,000 worth of money. I can't keep going like this. I think I have to leave early. And he said, he's a brilliant Christian man. He said, I think you do, actually. Excellent. And we'll help you to do it. What? So like, oh, great. All right. Okay. And I thought, well, I want to see what God wants as well. So I said, okay, God, what do you want me to do next? So illustration itself, I mean, I developed this very fast illustration style because the way of making ends meet as a book illustrator is you've got to be fast and people have to like what you do. So I'd really gone to this point of really refining my art style into very, very posh art style, which took ages to do, but was very pretty. And people said, "Yeah, that's really nice, really like that." And I get paid for it, but it wasn't quick enough to make an income. And then we were just finished. The diocese paid for us all to do coaching training. So I'm a trained coach. I'm not a coach, qualified coach, because I've not done the hours, but I'm a trained coach because I've done the training. So take it as you leave it. So don't call myself a coach, but know how to do it. And during that time, we had to practice coaching each other. And there were 2 really significant things that came up. One of them might mention later, which is the something about phrase in coaching. So it would be good to come back to that because I think it's a top tip is that one.
Okay.
But the other thing was I was trying to work out how to make ends meet, and I was in this coaching session with this bloke. He was coaching me, we were just having fun, and I said, I have to work out how to make ends meet. And it was then that I realised that I had to dump my style of being very posh and fast, very posh and nice and digging ages, charge more, much more, and drop back to the faster speed that I developed when I was 18, 19, 20 years old of this editorial cartoonist. And it just so happened that the 15 years previously, as I'd been doing the book illustrations, I got so fed up with posh illustrations, what basically had burnt me out a bit on illustration, that I picked up a book, and this is going to be one of my recommended books, by a guy called Quentin Blake, to basically, for the people who couldn't draw. Now, I could draw, but what it did is it was so close to my style, and I hadn't realised. I thought, well, I'll read this book. And it's you draw in it at the same time. It's brilliant. And you draw, and you read at the same time. You draw what he tells you to. And by the end of it, within 36 hours, my style had completely relaxed, was 20 times faster than it was before, and I started putting it on Facebook, and people weren't just going, oh, that's nice. They went, oh, wow, that's so awesome. And I'm like going, okay, faster, people think it's awesome, and I can charge more. Brill. So that became my style. And you'll see how that's relevant in a minute, because 12 months ago, not sure what I was going to do next. So of course, start praying, saying, God, what should I do next? And I said, oh, I give up. I've got no idea what to do next. It's your job. And within 24 hours, somebody gave me a call. A guy called Matt Pritchard, and he gave me a phone call. He said, Andy, he said, you drew for me 15 years ago a logo, and we've been in touch ever since. We're both magicians. And he said, yeah, he's much better than me, much better. He's a member of the Magic Circle. I'm not. And he said, can you draw conversations? I said, oh, no. I've got no idea. What do you mean? And he said, have a look at the Bible Project. So I went on there and said, well, that's the kind of style. Okay, right. And he said, do you want to have a go? And I said, well, let me look into it and see if anybody else has done it now. So I thought, what could it refer to? And I thought, well, maybe, what is it? It's live, isn't it? Live illustration, maybe? So I looked it up and went, hang on, it's got a name. It's called graphic recording. Yeah. I've been doing this for the last 30 years. What? And it's an industry. This is so cool. So I jumped in with Benjamin Fellis's course, because I have no idea. Right. So I like to learn fast. And because of doing all the artwork, I'd sort of like built up some money in the business for training and stuff. So I bought his course. So props to Ben on that one. And I thought, and his main thing was, that really helped me was reference to a few books, and I saw live finally between a TED talk and what he was saying, how it was done. And I went, I do this already. It's not just called drawing in church, which I've called it for years. I can do it. So I'd not even come across you by that point, you know.
Sure.
More conversation with Matt, and he said, and I said, look, I'd like to do it on iPad, because then we can try it out and just link it through a video projector. And he said, well, I think it should be done on paper. Or on canvases or something. So I looked around and you could do it on big foam core board. But I thought, well, the people we were doing it with were going to be young people talking about faith and science and the link between the two. And I thought, I can't draw it like that for you, because they would feel guilty if they threw it away. Anyway, I said, we'll do it on iPad. Anyway, it was in the January just gone that I decided I was going to a conference. And I thought, well, I know they won't mind if I sit at the back, but I want to do it a bit more than just on a piece of paper. I don't want to draw on an iPad. I can do it on paper and see what it feels like. So I got myself 4 pieces of foam core board, which is about A1 size on its side. But then I also got the paper, and I used the foam core board as my board, a real lightweight board. My previous easel had broken, so I bought myself a new easel, dropped another £100 on marker pens and some paper. And I said to the tech guys at the back, do you mind if I just sit at the back with you? You know, it wasn't a big space. I think about 200 people there for a 3-day conference. I said, can I just sit at the back with you and just draw? Yeah, all right then. So anyway, so I did. So quick cut ahead. The result of doing that means that the main people presenting then found out what I was doing, the fact that I could draw, become really good friends, and I've ended up illustrating for them and recouping about £5,000 worth of work off them. That's beside the point. The graphic recording stuff, so I've done books for them. They go internationally. So I'm an international illustrator, you see. So I did these... I was at the back drawing, and then somebody came up and saw what I was doing, and they went, oh, wow, can I take a photo? I thought you were just doing normal Christian art like everybody else was, but this is different. And then I even had one person, so people start taking photographs, and I've got these small pieces of paper, well, I say small, but A1s on landscape, all over the place, being drawn in this style I do, focusing on the art first, but I was trying at that point to say, it was kind of like there was a bit of a popcorn method going on, but I wanted it to be artistic, and by that point I hadn't quite managed to smush these two things together. The style I used to do together with actually sort of like trying to get data that people can hook in with. So I was like, oh my word, okay, yeah, sure, of course you can take photographs. So for an artist, people taking photographs of your work is like, that's the best ever. You don't care about selling it, you can just, you want to sell stuff. Sure. But if people taking photographs, you get excited. And then I had this lady come up, looked at this picture and burst into tears. I thought, by heck, what have I done now? And I said, why? She said, I can never follow anything that's said in these sort of things, and I feel so guilty about it. What you have done have made it so that I can remember what was said.
Wow.
And one of the things that my friend guided me on when another friend, actually, I got too many millionaire friends. And one particular millionaire friend said to me, when I was trying to work out what to do, he said, well, how does your art serve people? And I said, well, I don't know, really, and digging around. And then we discovered that doing the art as the books is I help people tell their stories. So that's my tagline. But I realised that this person, I'd done an active translation. And later I found it was actually even similar to... The way she reacted was even similar to somebody who gets sign language, if they're hard of hearing or deaf or deafened. Because some people, they can't manage to remember what's said. And so doing this meant that it wasn't just exciting and, oh, look, my words have been drawn. And more recently, I've discovered a better word is interface, but we can come on to that one as well if you like. So anyway, I thought, well, I'd never managed to do 9 hours a day for 3 days on an iPad. It would have done my head in. So we're going to do paper. So I phoned up. Don't know whether you've had him on or not, but Tom from Inky Thinking.
No, I need to have him on. I need to have him.
He would be cool. He's. I'll link you later another point. Okay. But he was they're one of 2 suppliers in the UK for Neuland products, okay. and I spoke to them, he was really good. And after talking to him, I decided I was going to actually invest in the graphic wall.
Yeah,
the LW-X. This sounds very cool. But you can expand it and all sorts. And it's like, I mean, I've now got 5 panels, so I go out 4 meters by 1.25 meters tall. So this thing's huge. I've even got the winders on the ends now, so I can do 25 meters non-stop, which is just so cool.
And for those who are watching or listening who don't know what the graphic Wally, I think was the name of it. It's like
the graphic Wally is like the little thing.
It's the little one.
It's quite narrow and small. I'm talking about the freestanding job. That's basically. Yeah, if you take a flip chart board and basically you just stack them for 4 meters,
five, yeah.
That's what I've got. All right, and it just keeps going. It's awesome.
And I think it's got like a winder, isn't it? A roll of paper that you can continuously
Well, it doesn't.
wind it?
It doesn't unless you drop the funds on the new stuff. So So be aware, this stuff isn't cheap. I think I've dropped about $5,000 on equipment so far.
Yeah.
So
I think that's the key of the graphic Wally is it's a smaller one. I think they intended it for camera or something, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Because I know Ben Felis has it, and it's got like a crank. It's got a roll of paper on one side and a roll on the other, and it's sort of like old school film. You would drag it across and take pictures.
Well, if you 10x that, literally 10x it, you get what I've got now. And the thing is that I mean, this is a top tip for anyone wanting to go into graphic recording. Go with looking like you know what you need to do. Now, apparently, I might be wrong on this, but apparently Disney discovered this. So I go full over place. So Disney, they had a little bit of feedback. Apparently, Disney Europe, I think, had some feedback that people thought that it was dirty. So what they did, they got more cleaners in, and people still said it was dirty. So they then put their cleaners in yellow jackets. Everybody said it was clean. And I learned. I mean, one of the things that I've established in the past is a board game cafe, so a community board game cafe, and we worked out. I mean, I made the money through affiliate processes at Amazon to buy the board games for the board game cafe. It's great, and just left it there. So community thing. But we recognised that if people came along to the cafe for the first time, because it's a pop-up cafe, and looked and went, "Oh, look, you've got just a few games, haven't you?" They wouldn't be impressed. Instead, I managed to, in the end, we've got about £3,000 worth of games, all through me raising entrepreneurial funds. See, it all works. And raise these funds to buy all these games. So people came in, it's like a sweet shop. They sort of went, "Oh, wow," got excited, and then stayed. And it wouldn't have been the same the other way. And, take the tip from Disney. I mean, I heard about Disney later, but I've always had since then, make it look like you know what you're doing by having the right kit. The idea of all the gear and no idea isn't quite true, because actually if you go in and you've just got sort of like ropey stuff, you can have all the ideas and the professionals will look and go, "Yeah, I haven't got a clue." And so you won't have that start of a 10 of them getting that first impression. You have a good set of kit and they will look and say, "You know what you're doing," and therefore they'll come with that mindset. It's called the Pygmalion effect, I do believe. So look that one up. Quite interesting. So anyway, I then took this I invested in this kit, went and did this gig elsewhere in the country for my mate Matt, and we first of all worked with those from primary school age, so up to about 11 years old, and it was brilliant. It was great fun. And then we did it again, and this time with teenagers. And the teenagers got well into the conversations. It was really deep. It was a really heavy day that they were talking about, and science and faith, and really digging deep. I mean, they did heavy lifting, and I just drew it. There was a bit more text than I liked on it, but it didn't matter. And we ended up with this really big board of that particular one was 3.5 meters long, with all of their conversations throughout the whole day, and all illustrated. And at the end of it, these 16, 17-year-olds came up and photographed their own work.
Wow.
And it's like, hang on a minute, you have done really heavy lifting, and you've been excited about taking photographs of this work at the end of the day. And the holy grail of a young person's phone is their photo albums. And it's like, yes. I don't believe this. So it kind of like went on from there then. I just started drawing for different people and carrying on sort of like, because I mean, once you've invested, I mean, at that point it was about £2,000.
Now you have to use that stuff, yeah.
You've got to say, right, I've got to use it, even if it just benefits people. And I started putting things on LinkedIn about, sort of like what I was discovering on the way through, learning stuff, still, building up relationships with a number of people. So, Grant was one of those people on the way through, and Paddy as well. And then sort of like there were other people, a guy called James Durno, brilliant chap. He worked, South Africa. He's just wonderful man. So he's been doing it for 25 years. And Dario, I know you've had Dario on.
Dario
Dario? Yeah, Dario. Yeah, you've had him on, and he was just sort of like really helpful. I didn't take part in his course. He just helped, which is just brilliant, Yeah. So at some point I'm going to be jumping in with him just to pay for his course. Say thank you for everything he's helped me with for free,
Yeah.
And it's just been a right old journey. So in one sense, I've been doing this thing for 20, 30 years, and in another sense, I've been doing it for 12 months, which is bizarre. But I think for me, the most exciting thing was, so I did a very big gig on Thursday. So, just this last Thursday gone. And they had sort of like these major, I mean, you've probably heard of BP and maybe Iceland. I don't know if you've heard of Iceland.
Yeah. They
had those kind of people, really top level people, top level managers there at the same time. And there's a guy there from, I won't say which big company it was, but the feedback here, I'm just going to read this to you because this actually kind of like encapsulates everything I'm trying to do. So remember, I'm trying to make art. So I'm coming from an artist's point of view. I'm coming from an artist perspective rather than I'm trying to communicate. And we can talk about, actually, no, you do art. Don't care what everybody says about how we're not artists. Yes, you are, and I'll tell you why. But this is what this guy said to me. He said, he said this, quote, "What became more apparent to me through the day was the benefit of using illustration to help capture and enhance the message, creating a new perspective and helping people make necessary connections to understand the story." So this was a day of virtual nothing but data. And I was thinking, how do I illustrate data? And pictures were forming, so I just drew them. He said, "And although individuals may have taken away something different, it highlighted to me that a different perception of reality is often needed. People of the nervous system of any organisation, yet often the importance of people, their perception of reality and how they connect everything together is underestimated." So what I do is I turn what people are saying into art. I will use as few words as possible to sort of like to make it make sense, so that it creates a bit of a dissonance. People have to solve the puzzle. Because when you solve puzzles, you get endorphins. This is how Wordle works. You then share it with somebody next to you saying, "Oh, I solved it." And they go, "Oh, I've solved it as well." And then they talk about it. And then endorphins work and community works. And then it becomes human. And I realized at that point that from what I got the other day, I thought, that's what I'm doing. It's not so much, it is interpretation, but even more so, it's interface between data and information, and even if it's told in story, I'm creating an interface between that and people who are listening and watching, and it's making it more human. So in a world of AI, when we're going faster and faster towards AI, me going in with my analog tools of paper on purpose, because it's a choice I've made, makes it so that it makes that stuff more human. And the more human we can make things, I think that's the way forward for the future.
I would think that because it's physical, it becomes more visceral, right? Like if you had done this on an iPad and even broadcast it on the same size screen, it might have had a similar impact, but there's something about that physical, like you can go up and touch it, like those kids, those teenage kids can go up and touch their words that were drawn by you, and maybe they can even feel the ink, right? Or, you know, like there's something tangible about it, right? Because the other thing is, so much of our world is intangible, right? It's this these photons and pixels and bits, right, that we sort of have control of, but they can change or they can disappear at any moment. And
that's right.
Well,
one of the big influences was when we had when I was trying to decide paper or digital. The team who was doing the schools work stuff sent me through one of their promo videos, and on it, one of the teachers, the head teachers from a previous session, had said, "What I love about this," and this wasn't my drawing or anything else. This was pre me getting involved. Says that we spend so much of our time on iPads and screens, to have the kids be able to come in and talk and explore in an analog way is fantastic. So when it was being suggested to me by one of the other team members, oh, let's just do it on iPad, it was like, but then we're just going back to the thing that the teacher said was not the unique selling thing. So I thought, I've got to do it on paper because it has to be unique. And that's kind of like just captured me. So I've always been, for the last 30 years, whenever the world goes in one direction, I go in the other direction, literally on purpose. So what are you all doing? We're not going digital. I'm not. So if somebody says, will you record this virtual, will you do this virtual event for us digitally? I'll go, nope. We'll pay you money for it. Nope. I'm only doing paper, and I'm only doing in person. That's it. And I'm only doing it on big sheets as well. So if you don't like it, I'm not doing it.
Interesting. Well,
find your niche and dig deep.
There's plenty of people who will do that work and do it well. So I mean, you could certainly, they can find somebody you can recommend.
I've got friends I can recommend actually. So
I would think so.
I do pass it on. If I can anyway.
It's good to know your sort of your boundaries, because then you can be really clear and you can really lean into the specific elements that you've chosen to work with, right? So that's pretty cool. And obviously, like you said, that you're not a typical churchman, right? You're the vicar for the people who don't usually go see vicars, right? So this fits right into your personality, I would think. Yeah.
I lean into it. That and the autistic side, I really lean into. On purpose, and it's quite amazing how many people then talk to you about that kind of stuff, and makes them realise that we've got a human face.
Yeah,
well, supposedly anyway.
It's funny, your story of discovering graphic recording is not so different from my discovering of graphic recording. I started exploring sketchnoting. I had no clue that this whole, just like you, this whole community and quote unquote industry existed, and this was 10, 15 years ago. I just stumbled onto it and realized, the stuff I was discovering myself and building sketchnoting totally matched the same principles that they were doing. They simply did it large scale, in person. Maybe they were trying to be more neutral. A lot of graphic recorders just try to be interpreters, right? They don't leave an opinion, right? So that was a little bit different. But I mean, at the core of it, it was really similar. And then I don't know, was it 15 years ago, I was invited to come to the IFVP in Pittsburgh, since I was nearby, and spoke to that group, and then became really good friends with lots of graphic recorders and see the relationship. But it's kind of amazing that you can have these ideas and sort of practice them, and only later stumble into like, wow, there's like this community.
Yeah. People pay for it. What?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
People pay for that? Okay, fine.
I could do that.
yeah. It's like I don't even need to think, and I get paid for it. I'm great. It's awesome. It's awesome. So
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say. I mean, I mentioned earlier, didn't I? That I mean, it's a big thing for me. Is the whole thing about, because I remember when you say that. So my brain really bounces between one thing and another. I think that's what really helps me to be able to do what I do. And with you saying about IFVP, I remember sort of like there's not that much on YouTube. You have to really dig for it.
Yeah.
But I found one of the sort of like the recordings of one from about 2017 or something. And I think it was Kelvy Bird was saying that, no, we are artists. Stop saying you're artists. And I was trying to think about why is it that so many people, sketchnoters as well, could come across and say, oh, it's not, we're not artists. And I think you've got your little certificate, haven't you? Saying it's okay to suck at art. Yeah, which I think is great. And I thought, I think one of the problems is that, I mean, you might disagree. Happy for that. That the problem is that people look and say art is realism. So what they do is, because they can't draw something realistically, they say, I can't draw, so I'm rubbish and I'm never going to try it again. Whereas I'm trying to teach people and say, well, actually, no, do you know when you do your letters in a particular way, that's actually art. If you haven't noticed, you can go and buy prints of letters and put it on a wall. So I'm coming from a very much an artist point of view, and I'm saying, look, what art does, so I discovered this in the Tate Gallery. So do you know the Tate Gallery? Are you familiar with that? So it's all modern art and stuff and made up stuff. I say made up, yes. And there was a huge canvas. I'm saying huge. I mean, we're talking feet upon feet upon feet by feet upon feet upon feet upon feet of grey canvas in this white room. And you'd walked in, it was battleship grey. And it was like, what's the point of that? Why? Why? So abstract art, always ask why. Seeing what it does to you. So abstract art is about what's it do to you. Abstractionism is slightly different, but what's it do to you? And you have to, and people are going, no, it's a bit rubbish, that, isn't it? How can that be in any gallery? But if you went up and you read the little plaque, little tiny plaque next to this huge canvas, it says, this is not saying that this is art. It is saying, what does art do to the room? What does art do to the room? So in other words, the grey canvas, so it says if the grey canvas wasn't here, it'd just be a white room. Now the grey canvas is here. What's it do to the rest of the room? Ignore the canvas. And you had all sorts of things. So you got people having conversations, deciding what it was, and all sorts. And you start to realise that the aesthetic of art is that it makes people talk. It makes you think different. It has an impact. In fact, I'm always saying that art is not meant to be hidden away in a secret gallery. Art is meant to be responded to. When I do a piece of art, I say, what do you think? And that person says, well, I think this. And I go, oh, why do you think that? Because it's the conversation it initiates, which is the important bit. And I think that that's the point, that when we do our graphic recordings, when we do our big physical thingies, you're creating conversation. You're not trying to just sort of like have, you're creating conversation. So whether that's just in letters or images, it doesn't matter. And then you get to the point of saying, well, actually, what is art? So art is a triangle. And you've got a symbol, you've got realistic, and you've got abstract. And art falls somewhere in that little triangle somewhere. So if you look at my style, which is, like say, New Yorker style, we're looking more about the symbol, somewhere in the symbol artistic kind of element. And the symbol and realistic. And the more realistic you do something, the more people will notice problems with your picture. They'll notice it all squiffy, whatever. But the more fun you make it, the more cartoony. I mean, I can draw one hand bigger than another to make a point. Because the hand's bigger. Yeah. And that's great, because people say, oh, it's just a style, isn't it? And they won't try and say it's wrong. So what I'm trying to say here is that you can actually draw, but just have fun with it. So just don't try worrying that, I haven't drawn a car that looks quite like a car. Instead, you can draw a car and say, well, if it's got these elements on it, people recognise it as a car. It's a bit like, a symbolic emoji of a smiley face is really just a circle, 2 dots and a curve, and that's it. But you arrange them and compose them into the right way, it's now a smiley face. And I think that so many people in the graphic recording and sketchnoting and visual thinking world have got it into their heads that they can't draw, and so have put up these barriers saying, I can't draw, therefore I don't do art. And not realise that actually what they need to do is say, actually, maybe I create art in a different way. Right. And I could explore it. And if they explore it and say, well, I can do art, then it might open the floodgates for them to be able to explore new spaces to go into, and relax a bit. So yeah, it's one of the things I do. I coach people and train people and in art as well. So anybody wants to know, I'll help them.
That discussion came up in Leiden with my friend Ben Crothers, who's from Australia, and he was challenging, 10 years ago when I wrote my book, my big mantra was ideas, not art. And it was positioned as so many people had baggage around art that would stop them from doing anything whatsoever. And the solution that I had at that time was, let's focus on the ideas. Don't worry about the art. That was the message I was saying. You can put a few elements together and you're producing communication. And then the problem is, over time, if you hold on to that, you feel like, well, then I'm not an artist, right? Exactly what you're talking about. So we discussed maybe the phrase could change to something more like ideas then art. So in other words, you begin building the ideas, and then eventually you realize you're kind of moving into an art space where it is art, and we can learn from artists to improve and level up and keep growing. So that was something we discussed. So it's right on that same track.
Yeah, and it's about sort of just practice, keep practicing and trying ideas out. And also, one of the things which I've been interested with sharing the work which I've been developing with other graphic recorders is to give you feedback, and then you suddenly find that what they're feeding back is their perspective on what it should be. So I've gone and so one of the things about training doing theology, and I've done for literally decades, is reflection and understanding, reflecting, refine, reflect, refine, reflect, refine. So I've developed now a kind of filter process and reflection process so that I can look at a piece of work I've done and decide what needs to change. And then when you're working on something, don't try and change everything all at once and learn to do everything all at once, but instead look and say, well, do you know what? I'm going to learn to do this one bit better in my style. And then when I've learned to do that bit, I'm going to learn to change this bit and do that over and over in the next thing. So you're doing iteration, and you iterate fast, but you just do lots of them, but then you're changing. So, so if you want to draw cartoon characters, learn to draw eyes, learn to draw a head. What's your style of drawing a head? Learn to draw the 3/4 view. Really, most of the time you only need face on, side on, and 3/4. That's all you need to do. Then you can do the clever tilting of the head and everything else. But just do those three first of all. Learn how to do it. Draw a ball. Learn to draw a ball and then do the half-circly things on them. It's not rocket science. It's kind of fairly simple, really.
Take it a bit at a time, it seems like is a good way to approach it, and not. I think you can be overwhelmed pretty easily with the totality of what you could do, right? So focusing on small bits and keep on working, and then eventually it will all come together as a unit. Well,
if people see my work, they get gobsmacked. They go, oh, you're so fast and you're so good. And I can't draw anything. It's like, that's because I've developed slowly. And because I'm an illustrator as well. One of the things that if you look at an athlete and they do drills, they slow it down and they go through the process. So if you watch an athlete practicing their hurdling, they kind of do this weird goose step kind of thing as they're just programming their muscles to do it. And I think that actually if anybody wants to learn to draw really fast, go really slow and learn what it looks like really slow. Go slow, learn to construct, and then do some little sprint exercises of how quickly can you do it, and then go back and do it again. Go slow and then sprint.
It's kind of a slow building process. That's really good advice.
This episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast is brought to you by Concepts, a perfect tool for sketchnoting, available on iOS, Windows, and Android. Concepts' vector-based drawing feature gives you the power to adjust your drawings anytime you like. You can nudge the curve of a line, swap out one brush for another, or change the stroke thickness and color at any stage of your drawing, saving hours and hours of rework. Vectors provide clean, crisp, high-resolution output for your sketchnotes at any size you need, large or small. Never worry about fuzzy sketchnotes again. Concepts is a powerful, flexible tool that's ideal for sketchnoting. Search Concepts in your favorite app store to give it a try.
We're almost stepping into tips, but we want to talk about tools before we get to the tips.
Okay.
So
I go all over the place.
You mentioned Neuland, you mentioned the graphic wall. Do you want to get into that kind of stuff? And do you do personal small scale stuff in sketchbooks with pens? Are there any tools that you
Well, I
especially
mean,
like?
no, I mean, I will grab any bit of ground, as they're called, any bit of paper or whatever. And some days I'll use pencil, some days I'll use ballpoint pen. It just depends what mood I'm in, and
Okay.
I like a good bit of colour. I mean, you find a lot of graphic recorders, they will use, they'll use like one, maybe two shade colours because they can't flick fast. But as I've done my work, and my family have looked and said, no, we like full colour best, so I have to draw full colour. And I thought, how am I going to draw quick enough? And then last week when I was working with a neuroscientist, and he was linking together the ideas that I was saying to be able to feed back to the group as we were working with these 200 people, he said, "What? I wonder what to do while you're drawing." I said, "I know. You can be my colorist." So I drew, and then he would color for me. So this I'm going to have going forward. I'm going to have somebody coloring for me because it's a heck of a lot easier. And I'll just put a little bit in and say, and he said, "What color do you want?" "I want that in pink." "Really?" "Yeah, let's go pink." So I kind of like put really bright colors in. So I try to reflect the brand, but then I'll throw in other colors at the same time. So I work in that color spectrum because I'm an artist and I love color. So,
Well, if you look at comics, I mean, you have the inker, you have the penciler, the inker, and the colorist, right? They separate.
That's where
those
I'm coming
things.
from. I mean, even in sort of like tool. Yeah, because we were doing tools, weren't we? Ignore the digital. I hate digital, apart from when I'm doing my book. So we won't even talk about them. Procreate, all right. Oh, have you seen Procreate Dreams? That's exciting.
Yeah, with the animation,
But no, I work in pure paper, but there's other tools as well, which I've just got. So those people who end up breaking their backs carrying those big boards and the stands and 2 rolls of paper in your ski boot or your document tube or whatever. And I mean, it must weigh about 10 kilo. I've just bought myself a camera bag, a big one, 100 quid, for all my marker pens. All right. So there's a top tip. Sort of like save money on big boxes and things. A camera bag is brilliant for all those marker pens, and all the spare inks and everything else. But put all those is I've just bought for myself something called a rock and roller, which I think are built for gigging musicians.
Okay.
You can get other sort of like types of them, but basically this thing drops down to about a half meter, but it'll stretch up to about 1.5 meters, and it's got stands on it, and you can put a bag on it, a big bag with ends on it. It's like this giant IKEA trolley thing, and it'll take up to £500 a weight.
Wow.
So I can put all this in my car. I can put the little stand in my car and put everything else into it, and then wheel it all in one go. Genius.
Wow.
So I'm a bit proud of that. So tools, get yourself a trolley and stop wrecking your back in, because 5 boards is about 30 kilo. It hurts.
And you're going to need your back to be performing.
Oh yeah, you wreck your shoulder. So camera bag and a rock and roller trolley to push everything in.
And Neuland markers, it sounds like you're a big Neuland fan.
Neuland markers and the biggest paper you can find and the graphic wall and all the rest of it.
Cool. Well, let's shift then to tips. I think we've sort of already got one. Don't wreck your back is probably tip number 0. But
yeah, I would. Very important.
So I request 3 tips from people, and I frame it as someone's listening who maybe they're in a rut, maybe they just need a little encouragement. What would be 3 things you would tell that person to help them move forward?
3. Right.
And you're not limited
practice.
to 3. I mean, you can go beyond 3.
Might be going a few hundred actually. They're going to 1,000 tips. Yeah. Get in contact with me and ask for some training. I hardly can't charge anything at all. Actually, I mean, at some point I was trying to come up with it already, but I've not managed to get around to it. But I am going to be putting a course together next year, which is going to be subscription based, because the cost of entry into this world of graphic recording is huge. It's really expensive. So I wanted people to have a starter for 10 to see if they liked it, and then they can go and buy a bigger course or whatever. So that's one. That's the intro to the tips. But I would say practice. The biggest thing of all is practice. So practice going slow, practice going fast. But one of the best things you could do, I think, is find the long form videos on YouTube. So there's plenty of them. So I would hate to say this, but dump TED talks. They're great, but they're so fast. You just feel depressed because you can't keep up with them.
Yeah.
So I've tried. Yeah, I've tried. And it's like, and some of them aren't all that good. So instead, what I suggest is go and find the long form videos, especially those based around business, because then you're learning at the same time. Okay, so that's the first thing. Graphic record the business ones. Okay. Second tip, and I don't know if this works in Android, but it certainly works on iPhone. When you've done your practice of your business tip, right, take a photograph of it. I mean, we always just take photographs of all the work, because iPhone, if you then type into search, it will search for the words that are actually on your graphic recording. Did you know that? I don't know if you knew that or not. So
no, I haven't used that.
Yeah, which is brilliant, because then it means, especially if you remember to write on the YouTube name of where you found it, when you want to reference back to your to find the information. So there are loads of things on there as well, like book summaries and things. When you want to reference it, you can say, "Oh, I remembered that it was the name of this guy who did it." So you type it into your iPhone, and then it'll bring up the graphic recording. What's more,
That's
if you
pretty
say
cool.
if you wanted a subject on sort of like abilities, so you wanted to find out, well, what is about? Lots of people I've heard recently have talked about the word ability, and I've written it a few times. Right, so you type the word ability in, and it brings up all the graphic recordings you've done on ability, and now you can link the ideas together. So that's really useful. And related to that is, if you're going to become a professional graphic recorder, it struck me the other day. So this is new thinking. I like to give people new thinking. We are the best networkers in the world. And there's massive value put in people who can network. But because we're going in to deal with different companies and people, we can network people together. So that's another tip. And the final one, I think, you would say, which is really useful, is it's a technique which is called something about. And I got this from the coaching when we were being coached. So the way that it went was that that you were put in a partnership with somebody and you talk to them, and you were told, right, tell them everything about what recently happened. So you tell them a story, and then the other person has to tell you back everything they can remember from what you said. And you go, no, you didn't remember everything. No, there's bits you missed. They said, we'll do it again, but this time the person another story, but this time the other person's going to summarize it into 2 or 3 sentences. And so this time you go, oh, actually, you got it quite right there, but you missed this bit. And I said, right, you're going to do it one more time with another partner. And this time you're going to go say something about, and give them one word. Okay. So you do that. So you're listening, and you finally realize you can't remember everything. So all that stress of trying to remember it, you can't do. And so you just relax and let the whole ideas just merge. And then you get the kind of like this one idea that seems to almost evolve in your head. And then you go, is it something about this? And you say one word, and the other person goes, yes, that's exactly it. And it's the weirdest of feelings. So, so when you give it, when you experience this, you go, I just felt heard. Now, if you take that and apply that to graphic recording and visual note-taking and sketchnoting, you suddenly realise that you can use so few words, and the fewer words you use, the better, which is brilliant. So what I tend to do in my process is, I've seen people write on Post-it notes and stick them up and stuff, and I couldn't do that. If you get a 2B pencil, so this is for people working on graphic recording on big walls, so top tip for them here, you can actually write on the wall with a pencil, and from a distance of about 5-6 foot away, no one can see the writing. They can't see it. You write quite big, no one can see it. So you don't even need to rub it off at the end. So you write it in pencil as you're going along. So when people start, they're often, like I'm doing today, waffle mode. They're telling stories. This is my history. It's got nothing to do with the thing they're going to talk about. And you don't want to capture that, so you can just write it. And just write out what they're saying, long form if you want, just so you can remember the bits they've said, because something might be relevant in the future. And then suddenly they'll say something, and they'll say it slightly slower and slightly louder. And you'll go, that's important. And then you look back at the notes, and now you can take everything they've said and turn it into an image. And then you're off, because now you're drawing at the same time as listening. So you can do that, and bringing all those things together, I think, creates a rather exciting space.
Wow, those are great tips.
I do apologise, that was rather a lot.
I think you ended up with like 5 or 6, which is great.
Yeah, I know. Well, you didn't limit it. So.
I told you could go beyond 3, so you're within your
I can waffle
here.
forever, I'm afraid.
Well, Andy, it's been so good to have you. How would we find you? What's the best place to find you? You have a website? Are you on certain social media, LinkedIn?
Yeah, you can find me. You can find me on virtually everywhere.
Okay.
Well, I'll say everywhere. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, and even my website. And it's One Grey Dot. So spelt the American way. So I'm going to spell it out for you because nobody gets this right for some reason. I came up with it years ago. So it's ONEGRAYDOT. All one word, not separated. It's all onegraydot.com, LinkedIn, One Grey Dot, and so it goes on. And it's great. So what I do is I start off with a big blank wall and I put one grey dot in the centre of it and I say it's no longer blank. So you can't spoil it now. It's got one grey dot in it. And I say, what do? We connect the grey dots, just one grey dot at a time. So all links in, it's all salesmanship.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And, while you were talking, just for fun, I did a little search and brought up your Facebook page. And at the top, you've got an image up there. And what it reminds me of, like you said, New Yorker, for me, it reminds me of Red Bull. The Red Bull gives you wings cartoons. Have you seen these? It's exactly
it's
like
it's all editorial cartooning, you see. So it's all
exactly.
like of the same kind of thing, really fast. So, best place to find me for sort of like this kind of stuff is probably on LinkedIn and Instagram.
Okay.
So,
of course, we always do show notes.
Facebook's Rev Andy Gray, if you really want to know. So, Facebook's Rev Andy Gray.
Yeah.
With an A.
Gotcha. And we'll, of course, put show notes, links to everything that we can find and that we can bother Andy to send to us and put into the list. So if you're curious to see more, you can click there and check it out. Well, thank you, Andy. It's so good to have you on the show. Thanks for the influence you're having in the world and with people who maybe don't expect it and need it. Thank you so much for all that work you're doing. I really appreciate it. And thank you for being on the show and sharing your story. It's been great to have you.
Thank you.
And for everybody who's listening or watching, this is another episode of the Sketchnote Army Podcast. Until next time.
The Sketchnote Army Podcast was created by me, Mike Rohde, and brought to you by Rohdesign Studios. It's produced and edited by Alec Polianis of AMP Creative Studios. The theme music was created by John Schiedermeyer. To support the creation of this show, I invite you to buy one of my books, the Sketchnote Handbook or the Sketchnote Workbook. You can find the books on Amazon or go to peachpit.com and use the code ROHDE40 for 40% off. Please share this podcast with other visual thinking friends and be sure to leave a nice rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast listening app so others can find the show.